Hello and welcome to Focus, our occasional series on matters of substantial national or international significance. In our opening episode today, in episode number 1, we take a look at the island nation, Sri Lanka, and talk about the fall of what was once a thriving economy. For you to get some perspective of the size of Lanka, I must tell you that Lanka has 22 million people living. In contrast, in our very own India, in our national capital, New Delhi, the population is 19 million. I'll talk to you about the facts first. I'll then speak to you about what caused the crisis. And we'll close out by looking at what are the lessons that we can actually learn and what exactly is the way forward. First, the facts. Inflation is sitting at 32%. That's the kind of percentage that India has never, ever faced in the last 100 years. A dollar cost 326 Sri Lankan rupees. In sharp contrast, a dollar costs just 78 INR. Fuel, as in petrol, has done the disappearing act, so much so that there's no fuel at the gas stations. There are substantially power cuts. Lankan citizens are facing as long as 14 hours of no electricity. In short, Sri Lanka's economy is in shambles. People cutting across religion have taken to the streets to vent their anger against the ruling dispensation. It's not a situation that you will want even for your worst of enemies. There is a foreign currency crisis of the first order. The country has no money to import, and it has no money to pay off its repayment obligations. Colombo has actually publicly announced that it is sitting out of its repayment responsibilities. In short, Sri Lanka has done rogue. It's a situation that's dramatically similar to what India faced in 1991, except that India did not default on an international payment obligation. But I'll come to 1991 later. Let's stick to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's debt to GDP ratio is 111%. That's dangerously high, even by modern standards of profligacy. So much for the facts. What led to the crisis? At the heart of the trouble is the current account deficit. As if that's not bad enough, there is a budgeted deficit as well. Together, the current account deficit and the budget deficit mean that the national economy spends far more than what it earns. And it doesn't produce enough goods, doesn't render enough services. Soon after winning the 2019 elections, the new government did something that was disastrous. It promised and it delivered on the promise of bringing in deep tax cuts. It meant that there was that much less money with the government. And then from absolutely nowhere, COVID struck, a black swan event that hit the nation's tourism into a tailspin. With that, remittances stopped. Forex reserves fell sharp, and they fell by a gigantic 70% in 2 years. Rating agencies downgraded the Lankan country, and it meant that investors would now stop investing in the island nation. So what did the government do? They continued to play the game of majoritarianism. The Easter attacks badly damaged tourism, a very key source of foreign exchange. And then Ukraine happened. The Ukraine war drove food and oil prices up globally, making imports that much more unaffordable. The government added foolishness to idiocy. The decision to ban all chemical fertilizers hit the farm sector. Agriculture went for a tailspin. The inside story, however, is that the decision was actually a no choice situation because the country did not have enough dollars to pay for its imports. Whatever the story, the underlying happening was that the Sri Lanka's agricultural economy went for a toss. Once upon a time, the Rajapaksas were cheered as heroes by the island's Buddhist Sinhalese majority for ending a 30-year-old civil war against the ethnic Tamils in 2009. What now, then, is the way forward? The government initially refused to seek help from the International Monetary Fund. That was clearly a wrong decision. Today, 1 year later, is 1 year late. The currency has already been devalued. The forex reserves are virtually gone. You now have to take a bedding bowl to the World Bank and you will have to put it out with humility and grace and accept international diktats that may or may not be to your liking. This situation is uncannily similar to what India faced in 1991. India's inflation was then 17%. India's forex reserves were equal to just meeting 2 weeks of imports. We were a handshaking distance away from economic bankruptcy. But luckily, in Prime Minister Narasimha Rao and Finance Minister Manmohan Singh, we had men of stature and standing who understood both political and economic compulsions. Today, as the new generation sees Sri Lanka spin into a bottomless pit, what Dr. Singh and Mr. Rao did should be starkly visible. Alas, sadly enough, unfortunately, Sri Lanka does not have these two men. The way forward for Lanka is a long, hard grind. What they now need is a strong government that can take tough decisions, that can take unilateral actions, and which must, in the same breath, take people along. There are two important lessons for India. Lesson number one, plurality is what can keep a nation going. Nationalistic ranting will never work in the long haul. Lesson number two, economic populism is good, but it is good only up to a point. When hard decisions need to be taken, they need to be taken. Like I said earlier, for Sri Lanka, the road ahead is hard. Will they be able to pull themselves out of the woods? Or will they look for a out-of-the-box solution? Will they look for a solution that many may not actually like? Will they look for a solution that many might call short-term by becoming a part of India, just like Sikkim became one in 1975? That, ladies and gentlemen, isn't exactly a harebrained solution. That's an idea that perhaps needs to be put up on the table for discussion. Thank you very much.